Rated M for mature.
I feel so extraordinary. Something's gotta hold on. I've got this feeling on emotion, a sudden sense of liberty. I used to think that the day would never come. I see the light in the shade of the morning sun. My morning sun is the drug that brings me near to the childhood I lost, replaced by fear.
Okay, hey everybody. We're here to talk about the not at all controversial, not remotely divisive new release, The Last Jedi Part 2. And just on that note, I do want us to jump right into it, but I also just want to preface with obviously some of this discussion will inevitably talk about like fan response to the game because it's just been so massive. It really doesn't make any sense to completely ignore it. And this is mainly for myself because I know that I have a habit of like falling into this. I'm going to be policing myself to avoid making this more of a reaction to other people's reaction instead of a reaction to the game. So
I wanted to go ahead and get that out the way up at the front, like maybe within the first 10-15 minutes, talking about fan reaction to this game and then just getting into our own thoughts because like more than I ever could have predicted, it really has become the Last Jedi of video games in that regard.
And like in a lot of ways, because you made that comparison before I'd even played, and I think obviously in like certain story ways that we'll get into, it's similar to The Last Jedi and like how that got reactions from people. But it's also similar from like my personal experience, just because I like to think I'm better than this, but I might have had a completely different reaction to these things if I'd come into it with the baggage that a lot of people did. Like, I don't really get invested in the world of Star Wars at all until I see The Last Jedi, and I just played the first Last of Us like 2 weeks ago, so that sort of lack of having been invested in these characters in this world for years prior to this game, I imagine sort of like informs my perspective a lot.
Yeah, because me and a lot of other people, well, it wasn't 7 years for me, it was more like 2, I think, maybe. I was like 2 years away from that, maybe like, yeah, so basically, I've lived with this game for 6.5 years. It came out 7 years ago on the PS3, and it really has been embedded in video game culture. Like whenever people make their top 10 list, Last of Us is somewhere on it.
And like I do follow a lot of gamers who do make top 10 lists, but like surprisingly not a lot of top 10 like all-timers lists. But when I see those, yeah, this game is usually on those.
And it did a lot for validating telling stories in games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cause especially like the casual gamer who plays games like Call of Duty or Destiny or any kind of shooter where you mostly just shoot at random things with your friends for 5 hours straight. Asks like, why are we doing narrative in game? Why are we like trying to tell like movie stories in games? And Last of Us is like, that shows you why.
Yeah. And like we discussed this when we talked about the first game. It's not necessarily that stuff like Call of Duty or stuff like that are not good like narratively either, where there are plenty of video games, and like I dare even say a majority of them that do have narratives, usually tell pretty solid narratives, but this game and now the sequel both do something that I'll get into way more later because I have like a whole take, like comparing this game to a totally separate thing. in regards to using the gameplay as a storytelling tool, that should be something that games do more often.
So why don't you go ahead and lay out the reception and how you feel about it.
Well, okay, just to start with my feelings about it, I really, really, really dug this game. I think I prefer it story-wise to the first one. I need a little bit more time to think on that because I haven't, of all the like digesting I've done of this game in like the day since I finished it, I haven't really thought too much to compare it with the first one because they are very different animals. Like the gameplay styles are very similar, obviously, but the kind of story they're telling is different. The structure is very different. I feel like I prefer this one, which, is in line with me being the guy who loves The Last Jedi. But even more than Last Jedi, I feel like a lot of the response to this game, like from the negative end, has just been really, really mean spirited. And like that's saying a lot because The Last Jedi got a lot of really mean spirited sort of criticism. And part of this, I don't want to get into like a huge discourse about just like gaming culture versus like film watching culture, but like being mainly outside of gamers, quote unquote, as a demographic, looking from the outside in, I see like a lot more sort of toxicity there than I do in people who like complain about movies. And again, that's saying a lot because it's not like that sphere is devoid of toxicity either. But when I look at the people who reacted really badly to The Last of Us Part 2, even more than the people who reacted badly to The Last Jedi, you see a lot of harassing the creators, harassing the actors, a lot of like assuming the worst. Like, oh, they don't care about us, or oh, they made their story terrible on purpose. And a lot of like, oh, it's anti-SJW. Like we've talked about the response to Abby and just her character design and the ludicrous amounts of like really gross, really misogynistic, like that's not what a normal woman looks like. And so it's been really I just say all this because unlike Last Jedi, where I can sort of untangle the nonsensical garbage gross arguments from the people who really do just have problems with the story, I don't have I find that process a little bit more difficult with this game. It's harder for me based just on the people that I've observed to separate those the what I'm going to call the valid arguments against the game from the not valid ones. And like there are people who just take issue with the story and the way it presents itself, and like we'll get into that. But I feel like just way too much of this game, way too much of its reception has been just really, really odd, just gross behavior that I just can't sanction at all.
No, a lot of it is like straight up just transphobic, homophobic, and just really, it's just bigotry. It's the most simple way I can put it. But this is also a very different situation from Last Jedi in that the game was leaked a good 2.5, 3 months before release. Well, not the whole game, but like significant story points. So apparently, Joel's death was leaked. Not the actual scene, but apparently there was that scene towards the end, right before the climax, when Ellie goes to Santa Barbara, when Dina and Ellie are downstairs in the kitchen, and Ellie tells her, "I don't plan on dying," and Dina says, "Well, yeah, neither did Jesse or Joel." Apparently, like that scene was leaked. The sex scene was leaked, and information that you'd be playing as Joel's killer for half the game. Those are all the big major things that were actually accurate that were leaked. And the whole game of telephone. A lot of people will take a narrative and run with it and throw things in there that don't apply at all. A lot of people were saying that Neil Druckmann himself came in and did the sex scene himself. Yeah, it was, I don't know, apparently because they're super transphobic. Because the other big thing that got tossed around the internet that I actually thought was true was that Abby was transgender. A lot of people made that assumption just because she's really yoked and strong. Which Neil Druckmann confirmed was not true at all. And they explained in the story that yeah, she got jacked and really buff because after Joel killed her father, she dedicated her life to making sure she could go toe to toe with this guy. She's never seen him, but apparently she knows that he's really strong for his age. So she built herself up. That's been her driving force since that day, was being strong enough to take down Joel. So yeah, people thought she was transgender, which isn't actually true. It doesn't come up anywhere in the game. Even if it was, like, I don't know if that doesn't change anything, but it's not relevant. But I guess people were grossed out that they thought they were watching a transgender sex scene. Anyway, there was a myriad of other like things that people took issue with that were blatantly just bigots. There's nothing else to call those people. But I can definitely understand not liking just on principle, because it initially felt like a slap in the face to me too, that you would make killing Joel the inciting incident of your story, and then make us play as his killer for half the game and try to make us sympathize with his killer. Now I appreciate how bold that is, and I was pretty shocked by how effective that was. I still didn't end up like, I like Abby, I like her, but they got me to like that character. But I definitely wouldn't say I was at any point on her side, if you're even wanting to say like pick a side necessarily, because I don't really tend to do that. But I still very much wanted Ellie to kill her, and because just I have that investment with Joel, and I see both sides. Sure, that was the point, and I was surprised at just how effective that was, and like, not all of that works for me. For the most part it does, but it's not enough for me to not still want Abby dead. But the bigger issue isn't that, like I talked to you before we started recording, it's not that Ellie doesn't kill Abby. That's not my issue with this story, and why I think that ultimately it doesn't really work. My issue is she doesn't kill Abby, and for all intents and purposes I don't know why, and it doesn't track, and I think it's out of character.
Well, okay. We're definitely going to talk about like that and the decision made at the end, like at length. But for right now, you did bring up that problem earlier, and I did think about it for like a while. And having listened to the interviews you sent me and like really thinking about it, I've come to a conclusion about it that I think the game could have maybe conveyed better. But I do think it tracks, and like we'll get into why I feel that way later. It's really interesting what you say about Abby, because, again, like, all these opinions subject to change with time. I'm coming off of this game really fresh. I just finished it like a day ago. And, like, again, I agree in regards to we shouldn't be picking sides. But if I was going to, I'd be on Abby's side. Like, Abby is probably my favorite character out of either of these two games, having just finished this one. Like, I really like her a lot. And I think part of that is, like we were talking about, like the comparison with Last Jedi, is that part of what happens when you, like, corrupt or kill or sort of demythologize a character like Joel is that it weeds out the people who sort of, like, idolized them when they were always incredibly flawed. And, like, a lot of the sort of worst reactions to the game have come from people who were like, I can't believe you would do Joel dirty like that. And honestly, and even the creators talk about like wanting you to hate Abby at first. There's never really a point where I hate Abby, because I felt like Joel got lucky to be alive for as long as he was. But coming off the end of the first game, I feel pretty strongly that for as much as I sympathize with him and for as much as I understand and want him and Ellie to like be together, Joel is a monster, and if it wasn't Abby, it was gonna be someone else who did him in. It was just a matter of time, and I was
Okay, that I don't agree with at all.
I was never going to like view somebody as like a hateable figure just because they killed Joel. Like I like Joel, but killing him was never going to be a shortcut to getting me to hate somebody.
He's also not a
So
monster. Like, I just don't agree with that sentiment at all. Like, yes,
yeah,
he's a very dark person, and he's very hardened by all the stuff he's had to do surviving for 20 years and losing his daughter. Joel's not a monster. Like, he has a genuinely loving, fatherly side to him that we see over the course of the first Last of Us,
he
and
does.
sporadic points in this game.
But he's also like we have and like I think it's easy to lose track of this just because these two games are both such very personal stories, and they really want you to focus on like the emotional relationships of this relatively small group of characters. What Joel did at the end of the first game doomed the world pretty much. Like, and we of course have to consider it's entirely possible that a cure wouldn't have worked anyway. It was always a shot in the dark, or like a coin flip, whether or not sacrificing Ellie would have had the intended effect. But by taking that possibility off the table entirely, and I forget who said this, but it was I think it was a video that mentioned like every death that happens after the events of the first game is in a roundabout way Joel's fault. Like every bit of suffering that happens as a result of the fact that we're still living like this and there's still infected running all over the place, like every bad thing that happens after the first game is in some way the result of what Joel did, and it's difficult not to consider that. Like this guy ruined countless lives, countless.
I mean, that's the whole point of that first game is like, I'm not someone who needs a story necessarily have some big poignant message at the end. And weirdly, everyone talks about these games like the first one has one and this one is supposed to have one. But if I had to nail down a message of the first game, it's that love, real love, will make you do just about anything. He has the choice of potentially bringing back the world or keeping the relationship with his surrogate daughter. And for him, that's not even a choice. Like, the world's not worth saving if Ellie's not in it.
Yeah, and like that's an interesting thing that also parallels Ellie's own like journey across this game, where so much it's really interesting because it's what causes that fracture in their relationship, and it's really interesting because we talked about in the last one how we take the ending, and it's pretty much agreed entirely that at the end of the game, when Ellie asks Joel what happened and he lies to her, and she's just like, okay, she understands that he's lying. And this game recontextualizes that insofar as she maybe knew he was lying, but she didn't have any idea like what actually happened. And when she finds that out, it creates this interesting thing where if Joel were to have lost Ellie, then he might as well have just killed himself right there, because what's the point of even going on living? And yet what he did in saving her sort of puts her in the exact same position where she's like, well, why am I alive anyway if my life and like my immunity wasn't going to be of some good? And like when we get to the final conversation between the two of them, and she's like, I can't believe you did that. My life would have mattered if you just let it happen. And like
See,
Ellie,
here's the issue that I understand Ellie's point of view, but my only real issue with the stance that she takes against Joel after finding out the truth is that she didn't even have that choice. Like, and that has nothing to do with Joel. Like, if Joel would have let that procedure happen, it would have happened. Like, she didn't get a chance to make that choice for herself anyway. As soon as she was drowned, they resuscitated her, put her back unconscious again, and then prepped her for surgery. Like, she was never conscious. They never straight up asked her, hey, do you want to die so the rest of the world can have a cure? She never got the chance to have that choice anyway. Like, the Fireflies didn't give her a choice anyway. So But
No, but I
for
think it's pretty clear even in the first game that like if she had had the choice, there's no question she would have done it.
oh yeah, when after they have like that beautiful giraffe scene, and Joel he steps back and he's kind of hesitant and he's like, oh, we don't have to do this. We can just go back to Tommy's. And then she's like, well, after everything we've been through and everything that I've done, it can't be for nothing. And she presses on. I can definitely see her saying yeah, but she didn't have the choice. Is my point. Like
Well, I
it,
mean,
it, it would have been one thing if they had asked her and she had said yes, but she didn't have the choice anyway. It's not like she made the choice and then Joel um took that from her. She didn't have a choice to make in the first place. She was
I
unconscious.
also, I also think it's important just to differentiate. On some level, it is about choice, but more than like you robbed choice from me, she's mad that Joel robbed like meaning from her life. And like whether or not it was her active choice, she's just understandably, I think, bitter that like whether okayed the surgery or not, if they did it, then I wouldn't just be another person just walking around in this wasteland that we live in. I could have helped people. Like my sacrifice would have meant something. The fact that I am immune would be more than just a convenience for me. It could be something that helps the entire world. And I would have liked to have done that, whether or not I directly said, okay, do it or not. I would have been okay dying for that cause, but you didn't even let that happen. Now, like, the world is screwed. I'm still immune, but it means nothing.
So you clearly don't have the same emotional investment in that first game as me. You don't like Joel nearly as much as I like Joel. So I imagine that death scene didn't really phase you at all.
Oh no, the
Like
death scene still hit me. Like that's just brutal stuff. And like the performances, especially like Ashley Johnson on the floor just yelling at him to get up, like that's very impactful stuff.
okay,
But
yeah,
yeah,
that was really hard for me to watch too, and um, was genuinely one of the first times that I was ever actually like genuinely angry playing a video game.
oof. Yeah, I
Like
can
I like every fiber of hatred and revenge that Ellie was feeling, I was feeling.
imagine. And like I could
Um,
completely understand where that's coming from, even if I didn't feel that same sort of like anger.
and I think it is also a little hard to feel. Well, first of all, I do want to touch on people's complaints in regards to Joel's death, because some people have said it's out of character for Joel and Tommy to be acting the way they're acting in that scene that leads to Joel's death, or it's like they scroll into this big house with a whole bunch of armed strangers that they don't know, and they're giving them their real names and where they're from or where their town is, and get
Mhm.
there, and like Joel's way too savvy and cynical for that. He wouldn't have made the choices that led to his death in the first place. I can definitely see where fans are coming from with that. At the same time, as Neil Druckmann has said, he's had 4 years to get comfortable, to have some degree of normalcy, and he's not in the same survival mode that he was after his daughter's death.
Yeah, like it's one of those things. It's just you have to accept that time has passed off screen, and these characters are in a different place than when we last left them. And like they've had relative comfort, and Tommy especially has been in Jackson for a long time, and like they understand, like they go out and they find people and they bring them in regularly. That's just the thing that they do. So they're not always like in survival mode 100% of the time anymore. They're not always ready for a fight.
Um, and I gotta say, Troy Baker, like we don't get a ton of Joel in this game, sadly for obvious reasons. But the time that we do get with Joel and the flashbacks,
Mhm.
beautiful. This is beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
the museum when it's Ellie's birthday and she's taken to the museum, Joel takes her to the museum. That's beautiful stuff. I liked all the flashback stuff.
Yeah, agreed. And like some people take issue with they have a similar thing that I have with Man of Steel, just because for those who don't know, we're doing a commentary on Batman v Superman later, and we both rewatched Man of Steel fairly recently. A lot of people have the issue with this game that I have with that movie, which is why bother with the flashback structure? Why not just tell the events of the story in the order that they occur? And I don't know. I feel like the flashbacks were all like the placement of them was very careful and very meaningful, and I really like the way that we like skip around time over the course of the game.
Yeah, in regards to the flashback, sure, I think those are fairly smartly placed. I think the main thing people have a problem with is the Abby portion. They either don't want to play as Joel's killer, period, like that's a deal breaker for them. B, like they don't like that it grinds the pacing to a halt, because you do have to it is essentially like starting over. Like you have to upgrade all new gear and weapons for Abby, and you're basically starting from scratch with her, and like you're playing the game again, essentially, is what that is. And they don't want to be open to investing themselves in the character that murdered Joel, and that I am sympathetic to a degree. But right after her first flashback scene, and then cutting to her killing Joel, from her perspective, I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this. This feels really skeevy to play as Joel's killer, and they know this, but this is the story that they're telling. I'm gonna be open to it, and I'm gonna press forward, and that's what I did. And honestly, like the gameplay was pretty solid. I was having fun taking down the scar. By the way, the scars, well, they're more terrifying to fight when you're Ellie, just because that's the first time you meet them, and the whistling, my God, like you don't know what tactics they're saying. Like they're talking in this like weird like whistling Morse code. You don't know what the heck they're saying. Like they could be saying like flank them from the left or the right, or you have no clue what the heck they're saying. It is mortifying.
And that tracks with Abby being the character that has had experience with them before, whereas like the player, Ellie is just encountering them for the first time.
Yeah, so they're not as scary when you're fighting them as Abby, but they're still probably the more tough than the WLF. The dogs were surprisingly easy, just because I knew how the dogs operate, and like them picking up my trail and stuff. I would set a bomb, or I would hit them with a bottle and just melee them and kill them up close and personal, and then duck off, so that dogs weren't constantly tracking me all over the map. I always went for the dogs first, or I would shoot an arrow and kill its owner, and then wait for it to find me, and then kill the dog to make sure the dog wasn't on me. But yeah, like those scars were something serious when you're Ellie, and then when you're Abby, you're fighting scars, and you're like, yeah, this is fine, whatever. I'm not super invested in the quote unquote story, because the story hasn't really happened yet. You're just looking for Owen, and then like the scars are about to hang you and kill you, and like that whole stretch where Abby bumps into the scars, and like you have nothing but a hammer in your bare hands, and you're straight up two-piecing zombies and like hammering zombies in the head. You're like, this is freaking awesome. And so that's when Abby meets them and finds out that these people are, like, oh, these select few are actually like human beings, and they saved her. Like that's the whole reason that she goes back for them the next day, is they didn't have to cut her down, but they did. And so they help each other fight off the zombies and get away to safety. And Abby just can't let it go, so she has to go out and help them. And this is against the WLF's rules. Like there are these two warring factions, and like one of my biggest issues with this game, aside from the ending, is I think that conflict is a little too thinly drawn. We don't know the specifics of the Scar's religion, and even playing as Abby and constantly walking through that compound, we still don't know a ton about the WLF. And so the world building there is not great. I think the world building in the first game was stronger, and you have all these notes that you pick up and give you certain people's a glimpse of their backstory in this world. But I think the world building could have been stronger in that regard for sure. But yeah, that is where like I'm hooked in and invested with Abby's story. Now I will say I can definitely see how some people feel it's disjointed because it kind of doesn't really have anything to do with Ellie going after Abby, because it's not like they intersect at all over the course of this. Ellie basically picks off all of her friends first, and then Abby tracks her down because Ellie carelessly left her map where she detailed all the locations she's been to and their home base, which is a theater. She carelessly leaves that there because she was shocked that she accidentally killed a pregnant girl. And that's where the two plot lines finally converge. But yeah, I was invested. I'll say that. Like, they got me on board with it. I still wasn't fully sympathetic to her in that, like, I suddenly like her more than Ellie. Like, I didn't have that at all. But like, they got me to care about her as much as they possibly could, which was pretty impressive.
There's a lot to get into there. First of all, let me just say I couldn't kill the dogs as much as possible because I'm a sap. I avoided killing any dogs that I could. But yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from in regards to the world building. I definitely agree there. Especially in regards to the scars and that whole conflict, and like the character of Isaac. I know that at some point in development he was originally meant to have a larger role, but then they kind of pared it down. Yeah, he's the character that I most think like, that's weird. I really don't understand why I'm supposed to care about this guy. He's barely here. And
you guys give us all of one scene with him and Abby before she goes off on her journey and her story starts.
And like he comes up all the time, so it's not like he's not a presence. It's just
he's like the leader of this group, and you get the sense that he's important.
I don't have any idea who he is.
Yeah, we don't really know who he is other than the fact that he's hardened and he's the leader, and he wants to take down the scars. But that's about it. We do nothing with him, and then he just dies later in Abby's storyline. Like, that was really underwhelming.
Like, I like the idea of the scars, and like I like that, of course, in the years after the world goes to complete pot, you would have like this sort of new age weird religion that crops up, and it's interesting that like the younger ones who again would have just had this be their entire life, like Lev and Yara, they don't know like slang. They're very unfamiliar with technology. And like there's interesting stuff to the scars, and like a lot of the notes that you do pick up I also like, because like you mentioned, the game like really goes out of its way to humanize all of the quote unquote enemy factions that you encounter as possible. Like you can find all these notes of like scars talking about how like they're really eager to get like betrothed to each other, or like how they're sad that they have to deliver bodies back to like family members. And like you even get similar things like that toward the end with the Rattlers, or the Frattlers as I like to call them. But the thing that the real big issue is just I'm not really sure what's going on with the scars versus the wolves, where it's just like,
we don't know why they're really fighting, what that whole conflict is even about, what started it.
I get the implication that it's about land, and that like they're fighting over pieces of land, but it's really not clear.
And it's weird. Like they had some treaty where it's like, if you guys just stay on your island, we're good. And then for whatever reason, they break that.
Yeah, and like seeing all the images of like their prophet everywhere, and like she comes up all the time. I was expecting her to like appear in a scene, and then she never does.
Yeah, that whole thing is just really, it's really underwhelming because like the first game has all this great attention to detail, and so does this one, but just the world building in that regard is lacking. Like, you're going to introduce these two factions, make such a big deal out of them. They're basically what Abby's story revolves around, and you're not going to give us any of their backstory or why they're doing what they're doing at all. Like, Abby's fighting against them with the wolves, and like, you don't have to do it in a way where it's like the characters are just expositing to us, the audience, but through just normal conversation, you can tell us why they're even fighting them. Like,
Yeah, I feel like
why are these two factions going at it?
Yeah, I feel like maybe they were leaning a bit too hard on, oh, it really worked in the last game when we hid a lot of the world building in background details and like optional things that you could pick up or listen to, when really I was like, okay, at some point it would be helpful if we just got a scene where someone laid out what is happening. But just on the note of that and like the way the game chooses to like humanize all these different characters and different factions, like I think that's something that's really brilliant about this. And again, like a lot of people who react badly to this game are sort of, I think, missing what Druckmann stated to be his point, which is that like they look at the game, like the story that we tell with Ellie and Abby and all the stuff that you can find that like humanizes the guys that you go after and that you kill, and they see it as the game being preachy and like preaching at them that violence and revenge is bad, when according to Druckmann the intent isn't to judge the player's actions but just present them. And that got me thinking about like my mind like spiraled comparing this game to Undertale, which is a game that I like a lot, but it's really interesting to contrast because that's a game that absolutely does judge you for being violent and vengeful. And Undertale is like interesting because that's a game that like plays around with the morality system, and it's a really well told story, but it doesn't push the gaming medium too much, I think. That's a game where every decision the player character makes is down to the player. It's a game where the story is about you, the person playing the game, and the impact that your decisions make through the avatar of your character. And like I think that's great, but it's not not as experimental as what this game does, which is that it like actively engineers a clean split between you, the player, and the characters that you play as in terms of what you want. So like, and it gets really muddy because what it made me think of is like I said, I don't start this game like hating the wolves. Like I understand why Ellie hates them, and yet like intellectually there's this difference between us that like when we get to the scenes like with Nora and stuff, and you have like the game forces you to press square so that like you kill them and get the information. In those moments, I'm having like a split with Ellie where I'm like, I really don't know how I feel about this. I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think this is necessary. But it takes advantage of this thing that's very specific to video games, where outside of that, when I'm just playing as Ellie and like I'm just walking around and like there's a bunch of wolves around me, I'll kill them indiscriminately because in the back of my head, I'm still thinking of them as quote unquote the bad guys, just because that's how video games work. I am playing as this character. These guys are impeding my progress. They're a threat to my avatar to the world. So they are the enemy. They are the bad guys. And like, even if in my brain I understand that these are not necessarily bad people, it's this really interesting thing that only video games can do, where it's like, even if they're not bad people, they are the enemy, and you have to treat them like the enemy, and you barely even think about it while you're doing it.
Well, yes and no. I mean, maybe you would, I don't know, maybe this is like too much like role playing, but I did. Actually, no, I wouldn't even say I was necessarily trying to make decisions as if I was. But the way I simply played the game was as strategic as possible, which is I was heavy on stealth. I'm a big fan of stealth in general, especially with the first game and this one. But
Same.
I handled everything stealthily. I was very much, conserve on ammo, to a high vantage point, use my arrow. I freaking love using the arrow. And take as many enemies out quietly as I can, and then try to sneak past the stragglers. Now, if one of them spots me, kill one or two, and then dip out and try to get to the next spot, so I don't have to waste any more ammo and risk getting hit or losing a significant amount of health trying to take out every single person in a given area.
Yeah, I had pretty much the same thing. And like I don't want to, just to clarify, I don't want to make what I'm saying sound like, oh, I actively seek out and like kill whoever during the gameplay sections. I also prefer to do the stealthy approach. Like, if possible, I will just stealth everywhere. But when I do find myself having to confront like wolves or scars or whoever, depending on the situation, like I just kind of do it. And I think that's everyone's experience, because again, you're playing a game, and this is another thing where just sort of like the gamer instinct that again, this is why we need games like this that like push the boundaries of the medium in a way that stuff like Undertale doesn't, where it's the game understands that because it's interactive, the only way that you can experience the story is if you choose to kill these specific people, and it knows that you want or need to experience the story. So like if this is like, you're forced to participate in a story where the player characters exist in this limbo where every important thing they do is still technically within your control. So like you have to choose to press square to kill Mel or Owen or Nora the same way that you choose to kill any random enemy, but it hits differently like in those scenes, because whether it's in the moment or whether it's like retrospectively thinking back on those scenes, you don't necessarily have the same desired outcome as Ellie does or as Abby does. They're enacting your will because you press the button, but they're also not. And it's this
I have
thing.
a very different read on that.
Okay.
With those specific moments, those moments happen regardless of what you do. And we'll get to, I guess we'll talk about this. Actually, I want to kind of save that for when we get to the ending, but I do want to talk more broadly about Abby, get into the nooks and crannies of her side of the story, so that we can then jump over to Ellie and explore the ending and how I feel about Ellie's journey overall.
Okay.
So with Abby, I think she kind of gets like most of the best boss fights in this game. Like, you get to fight what is named in the game, like not in the game itself, but if you go and look at the character model and extras, you'll see that it's called the Rat King. Abby fights that down in the bowels of the hospital, and it's insane. It's like a level straight out of Resident Evil.
It was ridiculous. I hated that thing. It was so weird.
Yeah, that definitely brought me back to playing the Resident Evil 2 remake. That was bananas crazy. I was not expecting them to basically give us some Resident Evil. Like, I mean, yeah, we're dealing with zombies, but like that was like a Resident Evil mutation level of zombie.
Yeah, and like the Shamblers also, they're just covered in eyeballs. Why are they covered in eyeballs?
The Shamblers are terrifying. They like the sound they make. It made my skin crawl the first time I played the game, and I just heard what they sound like.
Yeah, and like it's her also who has that fight with the Shambler that like follows you into like the little underground arcade and is like running through all the arcade machines. It's like, that was like, I don't want to have to deal with one of these right now.
Well, that's not a Shambler, that's a bloater. with all the arcade machines. That's a bloater, and that's a boss
Oh
fight.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'd forgotten. Yeah.
Well, and that's another thing I kind of liked was that bloaters aren't really a common enemy type in this game. They're kind of replaced with Shamblers,
Mm-hmm.
but the bloaters are like boss level enemies now. Like they're given their own like boss levels. You fight one there in the in that like game shop that you were talking about earlier, and you also fight one in one of the flashbacks with Joel.
Yeah.
And I remember playing that for the first time and thinking that how have I not killed this thing yet? I've hit it with 2 Molotov cocktails, shot it like half a dozen times. How is it still not dropped yet? And I'm doing a pretty good job running away from it and dodging it. But then it just grabs me out of nowhere and it's about to like rip my face apart. And then Joel thankfully stops it and kills. I was like, oh, that was part of the game. I thought I was gonna get killed.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. I was like, what did I do wrong?
Oh god, yeah, that was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And so as far as Abby's whole journey, see, I always have a hard time with the whole idea of the redemption arc, especially when it includes, just cold-blooded murder. Like, I don't think there's anything you can really do to make up for that, short of bringing the person back to life, which, we clearly can't do in this universe. So it's like, no matter what she does here in this story, I'm not going to come to a place where I like her more than Ellie or even forgive her for killing Joel. But, they made me like her. I don't think the redemption arc as an idea even works in this context.
Well,
fully, really, but
that you use the term redemption arc because I don't really think that's what this is. Where
Neil Druckmann says that like persistently in a lot of interviews and even in the podcast that I sent you.
Huh. Well, like, I think if he means like redemption specifically to the audience in regards to we were attached to this person that you killed and you have to redeem yourselves to us as players, maybe. But I think that's just a misuse of that phrase, because like a redemption arc would be she kills Joel and then the story acknowledges that like killing Joel was an objectively bad thing, and then afterward she has to make up for that. Like a redemption arc would be like, a Darth Vader. It's like this person did a terrible thing and then they have to redeem themselves by doing a objectively good thing afterwards. That's not what we do with Abby. And again, that's the structure.
It really is. Like, she kills Joel, but the thing that's supposedly supposed to redeem her is her deciding that, Lev is her family and taking him under her wing and like basically forming a Joel and Ellie relationship with him. Like, that's essentially supposed to be the redemption, as far as I can tell. But I don't. That doesn't really work because the whole idea of redemption in that way just doesn't work for me. Like, Joel's still dead. There's nothing you can do to change that. Like, you mentoring and caring for this kid does not make up for that.
Although again, I think this gets into a sort of circular thing of this is just kind of the setting we're in, and is it really possible for any of these people to be redeemed? Where it's like, she killed Joel, and if you're really attached to Joel, then that's terrible. But looking at it objectively, Joel has done far worse. Ellie has, or will after that, do debatably far worse. Tommy's probably done worse. Jesse's probably done worse. Oh, and everyone in this game, I don't think there's a single clean person in this game except for maybe Yara and Lev. And like, it's just...
I would say Dina's never really done anything that bad.
Well, not on screen, no, but we have to assume... Well, actually, you know what? Dina and Jesse and like the other people in Jackson might be exempt from this, just because we really don't know how often they get into conflicts with other people as opposed to just infected. But like the conflict between the wolves and the scars and like the way that Ellie goes about like attacking the wolves. Like everyone in this game, to varying degrees, has done something that they need to be redeemed for. And is it actually possible for any of them to accomplish that? I don't know.
I'm having a hard time agreeing with that. I think the vast majority of the people in Jackson do not have that. They're not warring with anyone.
We're talking about the characters that we focus on.
Sure. But like also, there's Jesse, there's Dina. Like those are not characters that strike me as like they didn't do the type of like awful vindictive stuff that Tommy and Joel did. Like even as Ellie's explaining that to her when they find one of Tommy's first victims in the hotel, she's like, wow. Like she's taken aback by that. Like she's clearly never done anything like that. Which reminds me, that's another one of my favorite scenes in the game, Ellie killing Abby's two friends, because it's this great mirror of Joel using those tactics in the previous game to find Ellie. And, he's super hard and he's done this so much that he's just really effective at it. She is driven purely by emotion for 99.9% of this game. Yeah. And she lets her emotions rile her up, and she takes her gun off of Owen and points it at Mel, and that gives him the opening he needs to attack her, and she just loses complete control of the situation and has to end up killing both of them out of self-defense.
It's like
I do like
but she doesn't have
in terms of perspective, because when we get to that point later in the game as Abby, it just looks like both your friends were murdered in cold blood. So that's not exactly what happened.
And like the thing I find interesting about Abby and like Ellie as sort of like opposed protagonists is that like I kept thinking throughout this game about Daredevil and Kingpin as to like in so many ways, in almost every way that matters, Abby and Ellie could be the same person. And just that's in part why, like, again, we're not supposed to like pick a side here, and why I feel like everyone, but especially the two of them, have stuff that they need to be redeemed for, and can they actually do it? Is like these two people, their experiences and their reactions to things are so similar, and that's the source of all the problems. Like, of course, like Ellie's immediate reaction to having her surrogate dad killed is revenge. That's exactly what Abby felt. And like the only difference is that like one of them had more time to stew in it. And like whenever they cross paths, it's always just like it's like watching a mirror pretty much. Like you two have been through so many of the same things. You've gone about things in so much the same way, and you've caused so much of the exact same kind of pain for each other. And like by the time that we get to the showdown in the theater, and that's when you're playing as Abby fighting Ellie, and I'm just like, that's the first instance where I'm really just like, okay, is there a way that I can just make this stop? I just want the violence to be over.
Yeah, I didn't really have that, but it was pretty intense playing through that scene. I also think it's very telling that both of them need to drag that kind of thing out. Like Abby could simply put a bullet in Joel's head, and that'd have been the end of it. Ellie could have easily just either stabbed Abby right there when she was still on the pole, or shot her. But she lets her down, puts all of her gear down, and just decides to brawl it out with her with nothing but a knife. Like, these people don't just need the other person dead, they need to genuinely hurt that other person.
Although I will say, my feeling during the whole like letting Abby down and like walking towards the boats thing, I felt like because Abby gets like pretty close with taking off the anchor, before Ellie's like, I can't let you leave. I think Ellie's really thinking about it. And this is like something that we might as well get into now, I suppose, with the ending in regards to you not buying at all that she lets Abby go. I think at that point, she's already kind of thinking, is all of this really worth it? And like they talk about in the interviews and like in the podcast and stuff, what we're meant to take from Ellie sparing Abby is that it's a sign that there is still a little bit of humanity left in her. And like if she kills Abby, then there's this implicit understanding from both the player and Ellie that like that's it, there's no coming back from that. And I
don't agree with that at all.
I buy that.
I don't think that message, I don't think that message works at all, because if that's really true, then there's no point of even attempting to do this redemption arc with Abby, because she killed Joel. So why does she get to come back from that and Ellie wouldn't if she were to go through with killing Abby? That doesn't make sense.
I suppose I actually have to think about that. Well, again,
that argument doesn't work for me.
Well, I think, and this is where I kind of have to untangle things, because when we talk about characters having a redemption arc, again, we're talking about for the audience. Like, Abby has to redeem herself in the eyes of the player, which I think is separate from Ellie, like, personally deciding for herself, I don't want to.
I don't think redemption is necessarily about whoever is watching the story happen. Redemption is just, it is for the character. It has nothing to do with me as a spectator watching or playing the experience. It's about this person atoning for what they've done. Like, well, that's all the same regardless.
In that case, I would say even more that Abby and Ellie have a very different experience in that department, because again, like, if we really think about it in terms of just outsiders looking in, I'm not gonna, and like, this is both me looking at it in Abby's shoes and like everyone surrounding Abby, and also just me as a player. Like, there's just, Joel just did worse things than Abby did. Like, that's just a fact. And
that doesn't justify what Abby did, though.
No, it doesn't. But I also think it does justify the idea that Abby has less to feel bad for in having killed Joel than Ellie would have in killing Abby. Like, I think one of those murders is just more conscionable than the other one would be. And also, part of what I think makes it different for the two of them is that Abby didn't have anything close to the Dina situation, which is like, so we do something sort of similar where in the earlier flashback of like 3-4 years earlier, we get a glimpse at Owen and Abby's relationship, and Owen tries to start something and Abby's like, I can't have a relationship right now, I'm still too fixated on getting Joel. And that's an issue. But it's very different to what we have with Ellie and Dina toward the end, where Dina is like, I'm begging you, please don't do this. And like, she basically all but says that like, we're done if you leave. Because Ellie's like, I love you. And she's like, prove it to me. Stay here. If you leave, I'm going to take that as a sign that you don't love me. Abby doesn't have anyone on her back like doing that. Everyone in Abby's like group is down to kill Joel. Abby's not like making any sort of personal betrayal or like sacrificing any of her relationships really when she goes after Joel. In continuing to go after Abby, Ellie has sacrificed her relationship, she sacrificed her son, and I think when she is like seconds away from murdering Abby and she flashbacks to her last conversation with Joel, and again, it's that conversation of, if the surgery had happened, my life would have meant something. I would have had a purpose. What I think happens in that moment is Ellie, like, really fully realizes, oh man, I had a purpose. I had meaning in my life. And that was this girl that I loved and this son that we were raising together. and I gave that up. Why? So I could do this, so that the purpose of my life could be killing this person? And she just realizes how futile and stupid that is. And I don't know, thinking about it, I feel like that works. It's like she's like, I
I
gave
don't
up
think that works.
I gave up the last thing that I had so I could do this. And why? What's the point? Will it make me feel better? No.
Well, there's no way to know until you do that.
I feel
But
like a lot of people who would get a sense of that before they actually go through with it.
no,
Especially
I don't
since
know. But
especially since Abby wasn't the only one in the room. Again, everyone else in that room like helped her kill Joel. She killed all of them, and it didn't make her feel a lick better.
because she didn't. Abby's the last one, and she's the one that actually committed the act.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think when they say like in interviews and stuff that like Ellie realizes that she has a bit of humanity left in her, I think she just understands in that moment of like completing the set and killing all of these people, that can't be what my life is about. And that's why, and like we'll talk about how you interpreted the very last scene. Like they mentioned that they never really discussed what the intent of Ellie leaving the house and like walking off into the distance was meant to be. I took that as she's going to at least try and find Dina and JJ again, because like that's in these are two games about love and hate. That's something real. That's a love that like even better arguably than what she had with Joel. That's a meaning for her life to have. It's a purpose that means something more than just I'm going to just go kill all these people for revenge. That means nothing. It's purposeless. It's hollow.
I don't really agree with that. And here's why. Firstly, I don't agree with Ellie thinking, "Oh, I had this relate." I don't think she's thinking about Dina at all in that moment. I mean, it's not showing us Dina. I think you're reaching it. It doesn't show us Dina. It shows us Joel and her last conversation with Joel, and I don't think that in any way tracks to her eventually just deciding to let her go. And I don't think that Dina. I don't think anything related to Dina has any reason to do with why she lets her go. It's simply because. So when we cut to the farm, which by the way, when we first cut to the farm, the first time I played the game, I thought the game was ending there. I was like, holy crap! The last thing I did was beat the snot out of Ellie. Now I am Ellie, and I'm just gonna let my revenge go and live peacefully on this farm. I thought the game was gonna end there, and I was like, this is insane. No wonder it's so divisive. No, but of course Tommy comes in. Before Tommy even shows up, she has this like flash to it out of nowhere, and like you can tell like months later she has massive PSD because of it. And it's not about that she values it necessarily over Dina, her getting revenge. For her, she needs it so that she can move on. She can't function properly really without getting that catharsis. She needs that. And she even says like to Dina, well, you're just gonna leave and I'm just supposed to wait here wondering if you're dead or not. And she says, I don't plan on dying. And when Dina says, I can't do this again, Ellie says, well, that'll be your choice. It's like she does not want to just give up Dina. She values that relationship, but she needs to kill Abby so that she can finally move on. That's where her head is at.
Yeah, that's absolutely where her head is at in that moment. I also just think she's wrong, and that she comes to realize that she's wrong. And like part of that is in the journal that she keeps. Like there's an entry where she mentions that like Dina's doing better because Dina talks about it, even if it's just talking about it to the baby, which is basically the same as just like talking to a wall. But she's talking about it, and she tries to get Ellie to talk about it, and Ellie just can't. And it's like Ellie has other options to at least try to process her feelings aside from killing a person. And like this idea that she has to murder Abby to get closure, it's just ridiculous. And I think she comes to understand that that's ridiculous.
I don't really agree with that.
All of the people in these games who try to get closure from killing someone never get that closure because they killed someone. Abby doesn't get closure from having killed Joel. She's not satisfied with it.
Yeah, she still has nightmares, and the only thing that satisfies those nightmares her from her killing from her losing her dad is saving Ellie. Not saving Ellie, saving Lev. After
Yeah.
she saves Lev, she has another dream where her dad is alive and like they connect and like she's finally had that closure because she's done something good and she's helped further and protect somebody else's life. But with Ellie, she doesn't know that. She doesn't know Abby's experiences. And this isn't about that. This is a character-driven game, and she's allowed to be flawed and make choices that you or I would not make. And I'm fine with that. I like that. But what I don't like is when like she's making a choice and in my opinion, it doesn't track. It doesn't follow. Like her decision to let her go just does not make sense to me. It doesn't. Even even if I were to take out the fact that you've killed how many people at this point just to get to Abby, like even in the Santa Barbara level when you shoot that guy that gives you her location, Ellie doesn't have to do that. Like the guy's handicapped. He's not even a threat anymore. He doesn't have a weapon. Like she didn't have to kill that guy. She did. Without a second thought, without a second hesitation. She's killed countless people and all of Abby's friends just to get to her, and I don't buy that she just lets that go.
Whether you think it works or not, like I do and you don't, it's not disputable that what happens in that last moment is like a very light switch moment of like Ellie spends the entire game up until that second basically being like a machine, which is like she's so certain that killing Abby is what she needs to do and everything else is just a stepping stone to that moment. Like she's not even thinking about it. She really just isn't even processing the fact that she's taking people's lives or that they have their own relationships or who cares. And again, that's another
there are definitely moments where she processes that, like after she beats the crap out of Nora to get her to tell her where Abby is. She's damn near catatonic on the bed with her shirt off, and Dina comes in and comforts her. That whole scene, like that's definitely like Ellie's actions taking a toll on her, and she is processing it to a degree, and she's thinking about it, but she's still fueled by emotion almost exclusively, and nothing changes from the time that she decides to leave to kill Abby again. When she leaves the farmhouse and comes to Santa Barbara, nothing's changed. Like there is nothing that happens that makes me buy that she would just change her mind or just in a flash moment decide not to just let her go and let her leave. Like I just don't buy it. We don't have to keep talking in circles about it because there's other stuff to talk about, but go ahead.
I'm just gonna leave it at I honestly think if she'd left with Dina's blessing, like Dina had said go ahead and kill her, she would have killed her. I really think that's what would have happened.
Okay. Well, I don't agree with all that, and I think that that's the big reason why the game overall as a story for me does not, like, I enjoyed this game immensely, don't get me wrong, and I came to like Abby a lot more than most people. Didn't love her, but I did enjoy a good portion of her story, and it was interesting and depressing, but still really, really engaging to see Ellie just deteriorate and delve deeper and deeper into despair and hatred and revenge and constantly make the wrong choice after wrong choice after wrong choice because she needs to get paid back for her father figure. And it was, I teared up when she tried to at the very end because Abby's bitten off her fingers and she can't play the song that Joel taught her at the beginning of the game.
Yeah,
Dude,
that was
like that's the last like physical thing of Joel she has to hold on to is that guitar, and the fact that he taught her how to play, and now because of her actions and how dead set she was on revenge, she doesn't even have that anymore. Like, she can no longer play guitar, and it's heartbreaking.
And there are people who like look at this game and say that it's like completely hopeless and that like it's pure nihilism. But I
I
think
don't think that's even necessarily a problem. Like, it's not a happy-go-lucky story. Not every
I
game,
don't think it's
or
true.
even every story in general, has to be that.
I also
Like,
just don't think it's true. I think there is an element of hope, even if you disagree with it from a storytelling perspective. There's an element of hope in she let Abby and Lev go, and even if you want to read it this way, there's an element of hope in, okay, the last thing she had of Joel, she doesn't have anymore. Now it really is time to just start over. She can actually have a new life now because she's forced by circumstance to just let it go and move on. Maybe now she can actually live.
She wasn't even forced to let it go. She just let it go. Like, she could have drowned Abby.
No, but I
But
mean, like, by the time that she gets her fingers bitten off, then whether or not Abby's alive, like, she still can't play the guitar. That connection is still severed. Regardless of
that's
what
true.
happens to Abby, like, her
Yeah.
relationship with Joel really is well and truly done. She has to go be something else now.
Which is why I think it's really interesting that they would decide to call this part 2 instead of just Last of Us 2. Because, in my opinion, No Jokeman has talked to this somewhat. He said it would be really hard, like extremely hard, to try to make a part 3 now. The first game was about the relationship between Ellie and Joel. The second game is very much what happens as, like, the consequences of that relationship. That's what the second game is about. But that relationship is now done. In my opinion, you cannot make another sequel to this franchise. It's nothing more to do with Joel out of the picture fully. Like maybe you could do some I don't know, spin-off stuff with other characters, but Joel and Ellie's story, that's done. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing more to do with that.
The only way you could conceivably do it is if Ellie takes a role in the next game that's similar to what Joel has in this one, which is comparatively smaller but still, like, important, and it's sort of like a different kind of passing of the torch thing. But that would still feel comparatively really odd. It's just, these two games, for as much as we've brought in Abby as like this secondary protagonist, these two games have been the story of Joel and Ellie's relationship and like the ramifications of that relationship on other people. And with Joel gone, and like, even if you wanted to do more flashbacks, I don't know what else you could say. Like, we really said everything we have to say with Joel's character at this point. It's
at that point you'd be really stretching it.
Yeah, I don't know where you go from this.
And that's fine with me. There's this horror franchise that I know you probably haven't seen. The first one is called The Collector. It's about this guy who tries to go and steal a diamond so that he can sell it to this like mobster guy and use it to pay off these like gang type dudes, or not gang dudes, but I think like loan sharks or whatever, who are harassing his ex-wife because she owes him a lot of money. And since she has like partial custody of the kids, like, I gotta protect her so I can in turn protect my daughter, all that. So he goes and tries to steal this diamond from this rich family, and it's been like raided with all these crazy death traps by a psychopath who goes and puts death traps in people's houses and places of business, and then picks the one survivor and takes them back to his like warehouse of torture and death. I know it's probably not the thing you would like, but It's a good franchise. Anyway, that movie had a sequel called The Collection, and it's not quite as good, but it's solid. And given how that ends, I'm like, okay, this is where this story ends. You guys are fine. There's nothing more to say here. There's nothing more to do here. Like, you can't make a sequel to this. And then I saw news like maybe about a week and a half ago that they're working on a third movie, and I'm like, okay, we'll see if this justifies itself. Like, you said all you had to say. Like, this, you can't really go on from here. Well, I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt and see, but like, this is another one of those situations where I feel like this is generally a story where you can't keep like adding on to this. There's nothing more to say, or there's no real organic or logical way to continue this story.
Yeah. And like it's an interesting thing to think about because whenever that idea comes up of like stories being continued or rebooted in like a way where it's like, well, what else do you have to say with this property? I like to consider it as sort of a thought exercise of like, okay, what could you do that would be thematically satisfying if you were to continue this? And it's just like, what would The Last of Us Part 3, like a successful version of that look like, and what would it have to say relative to parts 1 and 2? And it would have to be something about like even wider spanning consequences of like the first game was very much about insulating us into the relationship of these two people. The second game is about, okay, the relationship between these two people indirectly creates basically an entire world of chaos. Because of Joel and Ellie's relationship, everything goes south for the wolves, everything goes south for the scars. People who like have never met either of these people are having their lives impacted by this love that they have for each other and having their own love and their own hatred tested. And like I guess the next game, if they ever did one, would be, okay, but what's the even bigger ripple effect of that? Just how far do the consequences of these two people go without even their knowledge?
Yeah, I still feel like at that point you're stretching. You might as well just do like a spin-off title and let that be the end of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I want to be very, very clear. I really enjoyed this game. I did. I had this. First of all, this game looks beautiful. The fidelity is off the freaking charts. This
Yeah.
is one of the most beautiful and detailed games I have ever played in my entire life. The gameplay is extremely fun, especially now that I have upgraded and decked out my character completely. My stealth kills are a lot faster. I can, make equipment as needed with less tools. Just across the board, like the fidelity, giving all the characters names,
Yeah.
really getting into the nitty gritty of the violence and making it that feel as real and authentic as possible was really disturbing, but oddly satisfying to play. Like making sure, like it's all really impactful. Like, oh, and adding the dodge button to fights, I loved
Yeah.
doing that. Getting into straight up brawls with people, particularly the zombies and conserving ammunition, that was really fun to do, especially once I got good at it. Like dodging hits and just, or as Abby, just straight up two-piecing zombies and punching zombies and kicking
Yeah.
zombies in the face.
I
Yeah,
love
that was a lot of fun. Like it was really, really well refined and polished from the first game. The prone was really cool. I do like that, it was like realistic to an extent. Like they can still see you if they get close enough. So you got to be really quick with taking them out stealthily, which is what I did a lot with arrows. But yeah, that from top to bottom, the gameplay was solid. The graphics were insane. The music really accentuated every scene. Now, I've played it once and a half without music, and that was also really interesting, because it almost it's almost more immersive because obviously the characters in the moment, they're not hearing any music, so it kind of feels more like you're there. And I'm interested to see how you feel playing it without music, because that's kind of the experience I had where it felt more immersive to play it without music. Which the only reason I did that initially was so that I would have footage from all the cutscenes to edit a video together for this game, because even though I am conflicted about the story, and I think the ending is super problematic and ultimately it doesn't really work, the story was still really impactful, and it was still overall it was still fun enough and interesting enough that I felt like it definitely warranted its own video, and that I could put something together for it. So that's what I'm going to try to do before I have to head out to sea in a few days. But yeah, like I liked the game. It's not, because of the ending and the issues I have with it, I can't call it a masterpiece. I can't give this game that kind of praise. I think gameplay wise and graphically, it's a solid improvement over the first one for sure. But story wise, I just don't think it works as well. And but I still liked it, and I would definitely recommend anyone play it. If you've been listening to us prattle on about this game for damn near an hour and a half, I'm sure you've played it at some point, or you at least know all the spoilers. So yeah, I'm gonna hand it off to you, Nick.
Yeah, I feel a lot of the same. Like, obviously, the ending works better for me, and so the story as a whole, like, works better for me. I totally understand, like, more so even than Last Jedi. I can completely understand why the ending in particular wouldn't work for people for the reasons that you say. I like stand by my take on it, and I think it works on that level. But like, even apart from that, just much like the first game, the way, even if I felt like some of the story decisions weren't earned, I can't help but like endlessly admire this game for the way that it uses its medium to tell that story. Where again, we mentioned this last time with the fact that there will be a show based on The Last of Us, and Druckmann himself said basically the idea behind that was, we know some people just don't play video games, and we want them to still experience our story anyway, and I admire that. But even more so, I admire the fact that these two games are so uniquely video game stories, and I'm really curious to see how that translates, because I think so much of the emotional impact of this game, even when it's maybe making story decisions that aren't okay, but the way that you are using the fact that you are a video game to tell this story and to create like emotional resonance or emotional dissonance between me and the characters, or how the way that I play this game translates to the way that I feel about certain characters. Like, if you want to avoid killing like as many people as possible, then I imagine that's going to impact how you then view the killings that have to occur for the progression of the story. And again, we are wrapping up here, but like, as one last sort of comparison to Undertale and the fact that like what Neil Druckmann says about not judging but presenting, in Undertale, when like, it's like I mentioned, like playing on the fact that you are a gamer and you have to actively participate if you want to see the end of the story and you want to see the fates of these characters that you're invested in. If you choose to do like bad things in Undertale, you'll be deliberately sort of left with an unsatisfying ending, and not just unsatisfying in the story turns happen that aren't cathartic or that I don't buy sense. Like, the bad endings in Undertale are all just kind of deliberately lame bits of nothing, like, okay, the game is finished now, compared to the true ending, which is an actual conclusion to the narrative. The Last of Us 2 knows that, like, even if you want to, even if there are instances where, like, you're at odds with the characters, you're not going to put down the controller because you're just that invested and you need to see what happens. And I think the way that it is aware of that and the way that it plays on that is just a really, really brilliant stuff. And you shared that video with me, which is like, will the criticism of this game stop sort of more creative video game stories? I really hope this is an instance where game companies and developers actually pay more attention to the sales numbers than to the criticism, because I just want video games to keep going in this direction of whether you like the story or you agree with the story or not, just the level of like care and attention paid to making sure that this is a story that only video games could tell you the way that it's told. And I just admire it endlessly for that, if nothing else. And so, like, if you're
I'd like to speak to that real quick.
What'd you say?
I said I'd like to speak to that real quick.
Okay, yeah. Just my last thing is, if you're a crazy person who's somehow listened to this without playing this game, you're doing yourself a disservice. You have to experience this for yourself. So go out and play it.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage everyone to, play it and make up their own minds. And also, if, like, for those super vitriolic people who hate the game, even though they don't know anything outside of the leaks, half of which aren't even true, don't miss me with that. Like, you don't know the story because you haven't experienced the story. Anyway, this is the fastest selling PS4 exclusive ever. Over Spider-Man. Over freaking Spider-Man. That like, maybe I'm just a fanboy, but I feel like he's one of the most popular superheroes in the world. Like, it's kind of insane to me. This is the most fastest selling PS4 exclusive ever. And I do think it is the thing that they talk about in that video of the people who are positive are a lot more quiet. They're not as eager to come out and sing its praises on social media versus everyone who hates it wants to be super vitriolic, and those people are always the loudest on social media. Negativity is always the loudest on the internet, just because everyone can hide behind their keyboard or their phone. But I also think that is laughable. Like, studios are not paying any attention to the garbage people. Well, actually, maybe like the actual companies aren't paying any attention. I want to say, like, the industry and like people involved in content making at large, at least professionally, are definitely paying attention to it, because the awful vitriolic hatred and death threats that Laura Bailey has been getting online, it made news. Like, a Forbes article was published about it. Forbes, they don't even cover video games.
Yeah.
Really? Like, I mean, they make some video game related news, but they don't. Forbes isn't even known for covering video games, and they made an article about it. Like, that's how bad it got. And that's just awful to me. But as far as the developer side of it goes, I don't think. Yeah, the numbers speak for themselves. Everyone and their mother still went out and bought the game, regardless of all that. So I don't think it's going to change studios' incentive to let creators do what they do and just tell good stories, or make the attempt at telling good stories. But that's one thing I gotta say I appreciate about it. Even though I don't think the story fully comes together and works because of the ending, I definitely appreciate that this is by no means a safe story or a safe game. Like, it would have been so easy for them to come in and just do the traditional Hollywood sequel that everyone was expecting and wanted. We could have had a very similar story to the first game. It's just Joel and Ellie, bonding on another road trip, taking down whatever bad faction group, and that would have been the game. But they told the story they wanted to tell, not what they thought we wanted to see. And that I do appreciate, even though I don't think it's as it's as good as it could have been. But yeah,
I'm really interested
go
to
ahead.
see what the people who worked on this game go on to do next. And yeah, I hope that we get more stuff like this in the future.
Oh, one more thing before we sign off. I gotta go through and talk about the actors. My God.
Yes.
First of all, Troy Baker is a legend. Like one of, if not the most well-known voice actors in the history of the industry. Like this guy has done countless work. He's done like a dozen different characters in Darksiders 2, which is one of my favorite video games of all time. He did Joker in multiple different games and movies. He's done Bruce Wayne in multiple games and movies. Like this guy's range is through the freaking roof, and he did such a phenomenal job playing Joel in this game, and he was really warm and tender, and damn near every scene with him I was tearing up. Like the guy's great.
Yeah.
Ashley Johnson was also really good here. It was cool to see her go to a much darker place than even the bits in the first game. We see Ellie at her lowest point for pretty much the entire game,
Yeah.
and I can only imagine how that was for her to play. Like it took them 7 years to make this game, and she's having to go in and do scene after scene of killing pregnant people or getting tied up and watching her girlfriend get attacked or all these crazy different things, and she brought her A game. I loved her in this game.
Also cool to see
so
her interacting with another cool long-haired guy named Jesse after watching Infinity Train Book 2.
The only thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way with Jesse is like I guess I don't know. I don't know how to feel about his death, but like them just like we killed the actual father so that Ellie can be the quote unquote I don't know.
Well, it's two moms, and like I'm sure
His,
that Ellie would have had a very close relationship with the baby regardless. I didn't look at it as like killing off Jesse for functional reason. It's just another one of he was one of the voices of reason and one of the more well-adjusted people, and both sides kind of lose everything as a result of this conflict.
oh, not really Abby because she keeps her life and Lev.
Yeah, but well, her life. Oh, you mean like her actual being alive? Yeah, every
Yeah,
her and Ellie both make it out with that, but
she's really like malnutritioned and has clearly been starved for
and
months.
all of her
But
parents from her previous life are still dead. So, and her
yeah,
dog.
yeah, what you kill at the beginning, and then they have you, play around with the dog, knowing full well that that dog is gonna get murdered by Ellie later.
Uh,
But yeah, please tell us what you think of the game in the comments, our thoughts on it. Please be civil, decent human beings. I know it's a lot to ask in this time, but I don't know.
you
Try your
managed it with
best.
the last one. You managed it with the last couple videos. I believe that you guys can do it. Also, let us know what you think of the fact that Crash Bandicoot porn canonically exists in this game.
What?
Yes. Do you remember that scene where they're going through all the the weed, like all the marijuana, and like there's these DVDs, and one of them says "Smash Brandy's Cooch."
That's actually no way. I didn't know that's what that was.
Yes.
You've got to be kidding. Wow.
What a better
Oh,
note.
geez.
There's no better note to end this video on, so goodbye.